Hello and welcome everybody to our next Breakthrough Crop interview. I am so excited today because I have a very special guest. But before we get there, if you are new to this show, let me tell you what the show is all about. My mission is to interview leaders who are global leaders who have been in a lot of places and doing different things, like truly moving mountains, and especially during this volatile time that we're all living in. And as much as we can, we want to bring value to all our audience. So with further ado, I'm so happy and honored to have today with me Dan Tyre, Director HubSpot. I'm hearing a lot of rumors about you, Dan, but we need to confirm this with the audience. I heard that you were number 6 as part of the employee team inside of HubSpot. That was 13 years ago. But listen, forget about everything I said. Why don't you introduce yourself to the audience today?
My friend Sahir, who we're doing a program together now. So Sahir, as we're going back and forth, we meet every week and trying to get the curriculum to help our HubSpot partner channel get a little bit better in 2021. And so we're in one of these meetings and he slacks me. He's like, "Do you want to be on my podcast?" I'm like, "Yes, I do." He goes, "Are you a good podcast guest?" I go, "Yes, I am." He goes, "Why are you a good podcast guest?" I'm like, "It's the big energy." Right? If you're an introvert right now, you got to turn down your volume a little bit because I just shattered your eardrums, right? But it's super fun, and I'm really honored that you would invite me on the podcast. Happy to help, right? My name is Dan Tyre. I'm the luckiest man in the world, right? There is no question. When I tell you all my cred as an entrepreneur and as a father and as an investor, is unbelievable. I'm 62 years old. I'm really a 62-year-old millennial, right? I got like an attention span like an 8-year-old. I'm glued to my phone all the time, and I say a lot of dopey stuff. I've been married for 31 years, right, to my beautiful wife, Amy. She's the adult in the relationship. 30 of those years were awesome, unbelievable, and 1 mediocre year, which she allows me to say on the podcast. Right? And I say that because if you spend 31 years with somebody, you're going to have some ups and downs, right? My only marriage advice I ever give is just be kind to your significant other. Just be kind. Everybody's just trying to get through the world. And in 2020, it's a weird world. So I'm a little bit of a quirky guy, right? I graduated from Colgate University. If you have not connected with me on LinkedIn, do it. Just say I heard you on Sahir's podcast, and I'll connect with you. I have done 5 startups over the last 40 years. My first one went to $1 billion, right? It's kind of a funny story. When I graduated college, I was a bass player in a heavy metal rock and roll band. I had hair down to my shoulders. It was super fun. You only work half an hour a day, but the money's not that good. And I decided that I needed a real job, so I started selling computers. Within a year, I was the top salesperson for this company. And after a year, my boss comes in and he goes, "I'm quitting." I'm like, "Why?" He goes, "I'm going to a startup." And I'm like, "What's a startup?" He goes, "A small company that's going to go very quickly." I'm like, "All right, have a good time." He's like, No, I want to bring you with me." I'm like, "I got a job." He goes, "I'll pay you $1,500 more per year." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm a startup guy. Let's go." So I jumped to this company, Businessland. BUSL was the symbol. It was $3 million. There was like 100 people. And over the next 9 years, the company grew to $1.4 billion. It was amazing. And I was their turnaround expert. I started as a salesperson, moved to a sales manager, moved to a sales director, moved to an area director, worked in LA, San Francisco, New York. My last responsibility, I think, was responsible for 350 people in Manhattan, right? Responsible for $250 million of distribution, 30% of the profits of the company. And it was super fun. It was fast paced. It was interesting. It was challenging. It was full of young people. And I loved it. After 9 years, I quit and started a company in my dining room. And it was an agency built around collaboration technology. And over the next 9 years, I grew it from 2 people to 260, 6 locations across North America, $30 million agency. That's a sizable agency. Same thing. Took me 9 years. I was on the board of directors, helped raise $50 million, was the executive vice president of sales and marketing. And then I sold it to a Phoenix-based company. That's how I got to Arizona. My third startup went bankrupt. And that taught me business planning and humility, right? Because when you have to bring a company into receivership, it's hard. Right? But after you do it once, I've helped, it sounds a little weird, but I've helped dozens of companies go through bankruptcy without people like having too much anxiety. Because when it's not your company, when it's your company, you can't sleep, you can't eat. It's horrible. And I went through that. And then I realized it may be helpful if I could teach other people how to do it. My fourth startup was Groove Networks that got bought out by Microsoft. Lucky me, right?
Wow.
And then the vice president of sales there was Brian Halligan. So when they started HubSpot, Brian Halligan, the CEO and founder of HubSpot, called me and goes, "We want you to start with HubSpot." Right? And I'm like, "Why?" He goes, "You're the best startup guy I ever met." I'm like, "Why?" He goes, "You'll do anything. And the software isn't that good, so we need somebody who can sell it." So I started as the first salesperson, right? They had just hired this guy, Mark Roberge. Have you ever heard of Mark Roberge?
Of course. Of
Okay,
course.
Mark Roberge. First of all, he's such a nice guy. In 7 years, we had one argument. In 7 years, the greatest relationship ever. He was so smart. He was so empathetic. He taught me about sales. He taught me about hair products, which, as you can see, I don't need a lot of help on that. But he used to have his hair go straight up. I'm like, "How are you doing that?" He's going, "Hair product." I'm like, "What is hair product?" But he was like brilliant. He was so smart that I gave up thinking. After like working with him for like 6 months, I would like, there'd be like a strategy meeting where we'd come in and we would like work on how we're going to hire or how we're going to sell or personas or something like that. Amazing. And I would like prepare for like 3 days. I would like do the research and I would come in and they would ask the question. I'd be like, ooh, I know the answer to that. And I would say my answer. And Mark would be like, "That's kind of interesting." He'd never say, "No, that's not right." He'd say, "Another way to look at that," and then he'd always be right. He'd always have a better understanding. He was trained from MIT. He was smart. He was great. He was empathetic. He brought us from zero to $100 million. And now he's entrepreneur at residence at Harvard Business School. And I talk with him every chance I get. He's a dad. He's a great entrepreneur. He's a great instructor. He's a great author, The Sales Acceleration Formula. And over the last 13 years, I've been like HubSpot all the time. First salesperson, first sales manager, first sales director. I ran the international division before G2. I worked with Joe Sharon on sales recruiting. I ran the leadership program. I did the training program before Andrew Quinn came on the scene. And now I'm a global resource. I've got 5 jobs at HubSpot because 4 isn't enough. I teach, as you know, I teach the workshop and challenge, helping the partner program for an unbelievable executive, Katie Ng-Mack, right, who's been at HubSpot for 10 years. Unbelievable. I write twice a month on the sales blog with Lestranda Alford. She is my editor on the sales blog. By the way, the HubSpot sales blog just went over 3 million viewers, monthly viewers.
Wow.
Right? And the editors at the HubSpot sales blog, just amazing. I started with this lady, Leslie Yee, who's now in our executive thought program. Then I moved to this lady, Asia Frost, who was amazing, right? And we wrote like 20 blog articles. Then I moved to this lady, Meg Prager. And Meg is an unbelievably thoughtful, great mom, lived in Oakland. She now runs all of the blogs, and now I work with this lady, Lestranda. And twice a month she goes, "Tyre, I want you to talk about this." And I write it out, and then she edits it, makes it look good, and then we do that. Then I was telling you I have a mentor program. So if anybody needs a mentor, mentorship is very important as you scale. Go to dantyre.com, www.dantyre.com. You fill out the form for the mentorship program, and we've got like 25 of the greatest mentors ever. Oh my goodness, so much fun. And then there's about 25% of people of color. About half of them are women, right? We got women mentors, entrepreneur mentors, all this great stuff. And then I speak, usually about once a week, all over the world. I've been to Denmark, Germany. I've been to Mexico City. I was in Peru. I did a keynote in Sao Paulo, Brazil. They love me in Brazil. I have no idea why they love me in Brazil. I had 2 narrators because I talked too quick, right? They gave up after the first 15 minutes, right? In Brazil, like these people giving me a standing ovation. They have no idea what I'm saying. But like one of the keys is the big energy. Right? Which, as long as it doesn't annoy the crap out of you, you got to admit, it's kind of interesting. And so now I wrote a book in 2018, The Inbound Organization. I've written the forwards for multiple books. I work 12 days a year for HubSpot for startups, and I love HubSpot. And I know you're a HubSpot partner, and I know you're a great business person, but HubSpot is the greatest company in the world. right? I always say everything changed for me after 2007. I had an illustrious entrepreneurial career, but everything changed with the inbound revolution, right? Love helping partners, right? Love helping companies. I advise a couple of dozen companies. I'm an advisor, a board of directors on 4 different companies. I speak all the time, and I'm a philanthropist. I've made 26 angel investors, and my mission statement is to do the most good for the universe, right? So the
Wow.
reason I'm here is anything I can do now. Any of your listeners, you just connect with Dan Tyre and say, I listen to you and say, here's a podcast, and I'm happy to help, because it turns out I'm pretty good at scaling companies, pretty good at social responsibility, pretty good at helping people like grow personally and professionally, and it's super fun for me.
Dan, that's amazing. And I think the audience now can see why I was very hesitant to do a proper introduction like the one you did.
I know.
'Cause-
I live in
Thank
a
you.
purple house.
Thank
I got
you
a
for helping.
blind dog by the name of Katy Perry. I'm a bass player. I have more fun than anybody else in the world, right?
That's
You and I are
amazing.
working on this program,
That's
and we're
amazing.
just like goofing around all the time. I love to laugh. I believe like the secret of life is your relationships, which I shamelessly sold from Warren Buffett. Right, Warren Buffett is the greatest investor in the world. And people ask him, like, what's the key to a good life? He's like, the quality of your relationship. I'm like, wow, that is impressive. And I believe that. And I want people to have good relationships. And I want your listeners to grow good companies. And HubSpot's tagline is to help you grow better. That's not just as a business person. That's as a individual. That's as a dad or a mom. That's as a leader. It's as a brother or sister, a member of community. And like, that's super fun for me.
Amazing. Dan, thank you so much for sharing this with the audience. And I'm already, while you're speaking, I'm more excited now to even spend more time with you. And by the way, I just want to tell you one thing. We met like 3 years ago at HubSpot, and I've been following you. I attended personally some of your coaching as well. This took Flawless Inbound 30% year-over-year growth. I just want you to know that, because I never told you this before. I'm reading your books and everything. So now I want to ask you a different question. Yeah, I know that you offered inbound sales and inbound organization.
Right.
Before we go to the books and what's in them, what
Sure.
was the main driver? What drive you to do that? What was the pivot point to say, you know what, I have to do it. I see a lot of things and I just need to change that. What was that?
Okay, so it's a great question, Sahir. And you know, business has changed quite significantly in the last 10 years, right? How has it changed? How has business changed in the last 10 years?
The buyer, market conditions.
Okay,
team.
you gotta explain that, because not everybody realizes that, right? I was just telling the senior executive team at HubSpot yesterday, because Brian Halligan is famous for saying we're very early. We're only in the second inning, which is a U.S. reference to baseball, right? Which is we're early in the game. And I thought after 13 years of Dan Tyre jumping up and down, everybody knew what inbound was. No one knows what inbound is. No one knows. When you walk in and say, do you know what inbound is? They say it's a call center. I'm like, no, that's not it, right? And having spent 32 years building companies, the old way we did it is we shot from the hip, right? We did what we thought we should do. Right? It was sales oriented. I was the king of the universe for the first 32 years. And then it's exactly what you said. Market conditions changed. So in 2007, the balance changed from the salesperson being in charge to the customer being in charge. Now in 2007, it's the first time where you could get stuff in on Google, where you had as much information as the salesperson. So the job changed considerably. And as the first salesperson for HubSpot, I cold called for HubSpot. Don't tell anybody, right? It's like Halligan says, you got to get 10 deals. I'm like, all right. So I called everybody I knew. I'm like, you need to buy HubSpot. And I hate to tell you, I was a little pushy, but we needed the business, and like we didn't have any inbound leads. About 90 days in, right, we started getting inbound leads. And I would call people like you. I'd go, Sahir, this is Dan from HubSpot. And you're like, oh, yeah, I remember HubSpot. I was on your website. I filled out a form. And I was like, oh, my goodness. You know who I am? They're like, yeah, I filled out a form. You gave me an ebook. I'm like, do you know what we do? They're like, yeah, I spent a little time. I'm like, oh, this is going to change everything. I'm like, there's not a CEO in America that doesn't want to shorten the prospecting process by getting people to drop their contact information. And back then, people were like, what is inbound? You mean you can get people to come to your website and drop? I'm like, yeah, it's no longer about running $2 million ads on the Super Bowl. It's about tricking out your content, understanding your niche, and developing value. So the inbound philosophy is adding value, helping people before selling to them, right? And I'm like, that's the way everybody, isn't that the way you want to be treated, Sahir, when you're interested in solving a problem?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Turns out you're a damn fine human being. It turns out that's what everybody wants. If you have an option of a loud, like obnoxious Dan Tyre saying, Sahir, are you ready to make this decision by the weekend? Or somebody like, Sahir, let me just get all the information. You move at your own pace. You're a smart guy. You're going to choose that latter alternative all the time. So I was amazed. At 90 days in to HubSpot, when we first started, we had no inbound leads. But then we started getting inbound leads. I'd pick up the phone and I'd go through that process. And I hit my number all the time. And so I was meeting with our first CMO, and I'm like, I need more of those inbound leads. And he was laughing. And I'm like, why are you laughing? I need more of those inbound leads. And he's like, well, Dan, I have to hire somebody to build the content. I'm like, well, hire him. He's like, I don't have any headcount. I'm like, I'll give you sales headcount. And Mike was like, excuse me? I go, I will give you sales headcount to hire a marketing person. And it was easy because it was Mark Robert's headcount. It wasn't mine, right? I'm like, yeah, it's not sales, it's not marketing, it's schmarketing. We got to push them all together, right? And now in 2020, I want your listeners to know, if you're a CEO of a scaling organization, you have more than 8 people in your sales team, fire the least performing 2. Take the bottom 2, fire them, give all the money to either a growth partner or to marketing. Because it's different now. It used to be sales was the master of the universe, right? I made my living for 32 years. Like I could show a direct correlation to the number of people I hired and the revenue. And marketing could never do that. Now in 2020, if marketing can't bring the leads to the yard, you're pooched, because 75%, sometimes more, of the decision is made before a salesperson ever talks to somebody, right? And so marketing is more important than sales. There, I said it. So I tell CEOs, fire 2 least performing salespeople, give the money to market. I tell marketers, if you're not practicing inbound, quit and go to some place it is. Because do you know the statistics here? This is kind of interesting. Do you know the number of contacts that atrophy every year because people move jobs or they're no longer interested in something like that? No, guess what it is? Guess what percentage of your database will atrophy, will become non-relevant every year?
30%.
Okay, that's very, very good. It's 27%.
Oh, wow.
Right? I know. You're just a smart guy, right?
No,
you're not as loud as I am, but you're much smarter than I am. And I'm like, that seems high, but it's not. Because people move, they get promoted, they're not interested in your stuff. So if you're not constantly replenishing your database of interesting folks, unless you're American Express or Honeywell, you're going to die, right? You got to make sure that you're constantly replenishing. And the kicker to the trioca is that if you're a salesperson, you're not getting inbound leads, quit, right? Because inbound leads will change your life, right? And when you call somebody and say, Sahir, this is Dan from HubSpot, the guy goes, oh, Dan, I was just on your website last night. Thank you for your 90% of the challenge of a salesperson is talking to the right person at the right time. And inbound goes so much further to position you in the right time. So that is the inbound sales process. And I helped invent that. And Brian Signorelli wrote Inbound Selling. That's the book. There's 2 important books. One is Mark Robert's called The Sales Acceleration Formula, right? That's brilliant. You should have him on as a podcast guest because he's super articulate. I will. I'm happy to make the introduction. And he says this is how you go from 0 to 100 million in 7 years. And then Brian Signorelli, who is runs our part of our partner channel, right? He says this is what you do on a daily basis. This is how you have to act. And I have a famous blog article. Do you know my most famous blog article?
Tell me.
It's called Always Be Closing is Dead, How to Always Be Helping.
Wow.
And in 2015, I took a job as a salesperson. I was a director at HubSpot, but I couldn't commute to Cambridge all the time. So I decided I would take a territory job. And people are like, isn't that a step back? I'm like, no, it's good for my family. It's good for me. I'm going to do it. And so I started like in 2014 using the same techniques that I used in 2007. And if I tried to push anybody, especially a guy like you, if I said like, Sahir, we should make a decision like in the next week, You'd say, okay, Dan, and then you'd never call me back again. I couldn't get you on the phone. And then I'd show up on Twitter, Dan Tyre is a little pushy or something a lot worse than that. And so what I learned is I would cycle it. I'd go say, here, I'm an expert at this. Let's diagnose what your problem is. Let's get on the same page with what you need, and I'll help you make a recommendation. But you get to decide. And people are like, what? I'm like, I'm going to give you all this free stuff, but you get to decide. They're like, what's the trick, Tyre? I'm like, there is no trick, right? If you want to use the free stuff, you just use the free stuff. And all of HubSpot's software starts at free. We have a free CRM. We have a free sales product. We have a free marketing product, free services product. And that's the way you sell in 2020. You give something of value to somebody, they use it, and if they like it, they're like, that's great. And if they don't want more, they don't have to pay you, right? But they're still part of your ecosystem. We still love it. And HubSpot is a master of that freemium model of the way to help. But in 2017, I was giving a speech and say, here, you do a little bit of work with manufacturing, right?
Yes, I do.
And so manufacturing people are really nice. What are manufacturing people like?
I don't know, pragmatic.
Yes.
I think they usually are used to building their network through trade shows and relationship, and they rely on distribution and channel almost 50 to 60% of the time. At least that's my learning about manufacturing.
No, that's exactly right. We didn't prep for that question, and you answered both of the questions I've asked you perfectly. They are what I call salt of the earth. They're very nice guys. They're usually guys, a few women, but mostly dudes, right? They are all into relationships. The thing, I was speaking at the National Association of Tool and Die in Southern California, and I was trying to explain that this inbound process was not really sales and marketing. It was a philosophy of how you have to treat people like human beings, which manufacturing people know. It was how to help before you sell, which manufacturing people know. It's how to talk to your customer and let them to decide where they are in the process, which manufacturing people are great at. It's using data and analysis, which manufacturing people, you nailed it, they're all engineers. They're like you. They're all studying the spreadsheets and they're all looking at the correlations. And so I say, do you like to take prospects and walk them through your manufacturing facility? And they're like, we love that. I'm like, why do you love it? They go, because they get to know us a little bit. They see the millions of investments that we've made. And every time we walk them through, right, they buy from us. I'm like, okay, think of your website like a tour, a virtual tour through your facility. And they're like, oh, I go, if they come to your website, they don't see that. If it's not welcoming, if they don't know who you are, if they don't see a little video from the sales director, if they don't see a video from the guy who actually does the production, if they don't see a video from you, you're like ignoring them. And they're like, Tyre, that's brilliant. And so at that show, there was a gentleman by the name of Todd Hockenberry. And Todd, I've known for 10 years. He's a super nice guy. He only works for manufacturing. He holds 3 patents in lasers. And he's such a nice guy. In writing the book, we never had an argument, like not one argument. And we spent hundreds of hours on it. And he's like just super meaningful about inbound. And he's like, I talk about inbound organization just like you. He goes, we should write a book. And I'm like, okay, I'm a little busy. He's like, no, we should write a book. And I'm like, I got a lot of things to do. He goes, I'll help you. And I'm like, hold on a second. You'll help me write the book? He goes, yeah. So we wrote the book together. And he had both of our ideas. The thing is, he was such a good co-author because I work for $1 billion tech company, right? And I think everybody has what every $1 billion tech company's got. And he used to laugh at me. He would never say, Dan, that's stupid. I would say like, well, just put it on the wiki. And he'd like chuckle. He goes, how many of your customers do you think have a wiki? And I go, all of them. He's going, no. And then we talk about the sales process. He goes, do you know how to sell in industrial and manufacturing? I'm like, no. He goes, you got to build a prototype. You got to send the prototype out. There's all these like intricacies. And like he knows it like the back of his hand. So we started writing. And then because I'm the luckiest guy in the world, Wiley, the big US publishing house, They ping me. They go, we hear you're writing a book. And I'm like, yeah. They're like, do you need a publisher? And I'm like, excuse me? They're like, would you like us to publish your book? And I'm like, yes, I would. And they're like, there's only one thing. You got to finish it in the next 90 days. And I go to Todd, how many words do we have? And he's like, 3,000. I ask Wiley, how many words are in a book? They're like 63,000. And I'm like, okay, so I got to write 60,000 words in the next 90 days. They're like, yes. Or like, we won't publish your book. I'm like, holy cow. So Todd and I wrote every single day. Like I did my day job and up, but we wrote I got up at 5 o'clock in the morning, right? He would, and he's on the East Coast, so it was a little later from, we work like every day. Saturday, Sunday, we worked Thanksgiving, and our due date was December 15th. We finally got it to Wiley, and they were a great publisher. They published it out. They put it to Barnes & Nobles all over. It's on Amazon. You can go to www.inbound organization if you want bulk buys. And it was super impactful because the whole idea of the inbound organization is to provide leadership principles. It's how to build and strengthen your company's future using inbound principles. And on a daily basis, people will Slack me or they'll post on LinkedIn. This is a hugely impactful book because, and Todd said that was going to happen. He said, we wrote it in 2018. I thought it was going to be an instant bestseller. He's going to go, no, it's going to be a slow build, which is proven to be right.
Which it is, yeah.
Yeah, because it takes a little bit of time for people to wrap their brain around. But we do consulting around it. We work with companies like Flawless to teach you how to do consulting about it. But if you want to really live the inbound principles, right, you've got to understand, first of all, your benchmark of where you're at. So we have a calculator. We have an assessment tool on the website. So you go to WW Inbound Organization, you fill out the assessment tool, and we'll tell you what you need to improve. And then we run webinars every month. So we'll teach you something about it. There's 24 podcasts that we've cut that you can go in and you can learn all this stuff. And we do it because inbound it's not only a management philosophy, it's really a competitive advantage. And you proved it. If you're using inbound, you can grow 30% a year. Right? If you're not, it could be a little bit harder. And there's always different ways of doing it. But we believe strongly that helping, not selling, is a solid way to gain competitive advantage.
Dan, I really love what you're saying because especially right now, while we're recording this interview, like you know exactly what's happening worldwide, the volatility in the market and all those kind of things. At Flawless and Bound, 70% of our book of business is B2B organizations, and a big portion of it is manufacturing. So you're really kind of hitting the nail on the head because manufacturing rely on relationship and trade show. And you're coming with this concept of inbound organization, which I think would be a great value for them. So thank you for shedding lights here.
No worries. And if you're a manufacturing and industrial company, talk to Sahir because he understands the seasonality, the vocabulary, the rhythms. Now, what everybody says, I ask them, do you want to use your website as a competitive advantage? And they all say yes. And I go, great. Do you know how you compare against your competitors online? And they say, no. I go, I do. Would you like me to share that with you? They go, yes. Right? And then we see if they're ahead or behind. In most cases, they're in the middle of the pack. And then we use technology, right? People always say, teach me those tricks you know, Tyre. I go, they're not tricks. This is science, right? If you had listened to Dan Tyre and invested in inbound in 2007, you would own your market. Right? Because in that time, the balance of power has switched. It's exactly the way you were saying. Right? Now, the balance of power is in the buyer, and you've got to recognize that, understand it, and there's ways to use that science to make sure you embrace that. Right? In the Inbound Organization book, there's an article about an industrial company that was not an industry leader. But what they did is when they wanted a prototype, right, they'd send it to you for free within 24 hours, and they out-hustled everybody else. And they grew to maximize their production outlay because they were quicker than everybody else. To do that, right, they had to have a form on their website. They had to have people walk through a little video. They had to fill that out, right? They made several $100 commitment of building the prototype, then sending it out. They got all the business. Because if you're going to hustle that much for somebody that before they're even a customer, you're going to know that they're going to treat you like a great customer once you start paying them money.
Totally, because they're adding value day one in a very long sales process. And if it's done properly, they can see the ROI. I love what you said about ABC is dead and it's all about ABH and like always be helping. And I love this kind of concept.
Yeah, so the key is, that blog article has created 80,000 leads for HubSpot over the last 5 years. 80,000, right? And 4,000 HubSpot customers, right? So the reason I'm a big time blogger, you can go to Dan Tyre HubSpot sales blog. You'll see the 100 blog articles I've done, right? And the ladies of the HubSpot sales blog, they all wear headbands for some reason. I'm not quite sure. I have an honorary headband. I didn't wear it today because I don't really think I need it. But they take the picture. They understand how to convert. This is a very interesting thing for, it's a little bit in the weeds, but for business leaders of industrial and manufacturing companies. It turns out that virtually no one reads the entire blog article, right? They scan the blog article and then they move directly to about the middle of the blog article. So your best call to action where you convert isn't at the end of the blog article, it's in the middle, right? Isn't that interesting?
Wow.
I know, you'd think that people would read blog articles because like that's how we get information out. Most people, over 85%, just go halfway through and they go, okay, I got this. I want to learn a little more. I want to dig in. And so your best conversions are typically in the middle of the blog article rather than the end.
Wow, I learned something new today. I mean, I learned from you something new each day, but today I learned something brand new. That's amazing. Wow. So Dan, I want you now to take the audience to HubSpot, with the transition that happened, especially we're now October 2020, and we know that things change really from March to October. Speak to me about like how this transitioning is happening and how sales team need to think differently, especially when we're during COVID or kind of the new norm that organizations are really leaning towards.
Yeah.
How should sales team think?
All right. So sales teams are no longer sales teams. They're schmarketing teams. Say that word, Sahir.
Schmarketing teams. Tell me more about that.
I know. Schmarketing is sales and marketing connection. It's not smart marketing, it's sales and marketing connection. And the companies that have alignment between sales and marketing outperform the people who don't. When I was starting my business career in the 80s, you had sales, and they were all men, marketing, all women. You had 30 salespeople for every first marketing person. Now it should be not exactly flipped, but it should be a little bit more even. HubSpot has 400 people in our marketing organization, right? And it is equal, right? Because if you're not bringing in the lead, salespeople will never be able to close it, right? So first of all, it's sales and marketing. You start that by making sure that you have the same common vocabulary, right? Marketing people now have a quota, right? They bring in leads at certain times of the company. And all of your listeners, if you need help with the vocabulary or the quota or the forecast for leads, talk to Sahir. He knows all about this, right? He's an expert at help setting the right expectations. Then you have to have a quota for the salespeople, not just for selling the product, right? But they have to have a quota for how many times they have to follow up. And in today's world, right, if you download an ebook, right, I have to call you 4 times in 12 days. I have to pick up the phone, I have to call you, and then I have to leave a voicemail in Canada or in the US. Then I wait 2 days and I call you a second time, right? And then I leave a voicemail. I always send an email. And in my email, I say, Sahir, as per my voicemail, right? So I'm going to do 4 attempts in 12 days. The first one is call and email. Second is call, voicemail, and email. Third is call and email. That's 3 days later. My last one, my subject line for my email is, should I stay or should I go? Right? Most businesses need fewer salespeople and a few more marketing people. In most instances, it doesn't always break down that. But now in COVID, salespeople aren't going to the office. They're not drinking coffee. They're not playing golf. They're definitely not taking people to lunch, right? They're involved in videos like this where you're engaging, right? And when I cycle in, I do my homework. Before I ever talk to you, Sahir, I know you run Flawless Inbound. I know that you're in Canada. I know who you are. I know all about you. So when I say, Sahir, how are things in Calgary? Then I know who you are, and you know that I've done a little bit of research on you, right? And then I recap something I've seen either on your website or LinkedIn so that you know I've done the research. Then it's all about you. Then I do a discovery call. We don't do product demos anymore. We do a discovery call. And I know you're an expert at it. You can teach people the inbound sales methodology to engage. So sales
I learned from the master. I learned from the master. I just want to tell you, I'm learning from the master.
Thank you very much. Sahir, you are very good at this because you got good listening skills. You're also an expert in this niche, right? When you talk to Sahir, you'll know in the first 10 minutes, he knows the rhythms of industrial and manufacturing companies. He'll know what you're talking about. It will be very easy for you to realize, wow, this guy is an expert at helping us grow, right? Getting us more customers, right? And in 2020, the sales teams, they're scattered all over. It used to be you'd have to hire people in your geographic area. Now you can hire anyone from anywhere, right? And as long as they have a Zoom connection, and as long as they have a way to connect, right, it's very easy to ensure that it's that you can start the conversation. And that's the way you start the conversation, is you open up, you say hello, you explain the research that you've done, and now all of a sudden that you can move it to the next step. Right? No product demos, because no one cares about your product. What they care about is your ability to work in this niche, your ability to understand the problem, your ability to diagnose whether they're a good fit or not, and the ability to then make a recommendation of how they start and how they move to the sales to level 2, right? So that it's a good working relationship. In the old days, salespeople closed a deal, then you never saw me. Today, we don't close a deal, we start a relationship. And we start that the first time we talk. So I call it, and then if I am your account executive, I touch base with you twice a year. And I give you my cell phone. I go, if you're not happy, you text me, right? Because in the old days, if you didn't have a happy customer, what would happen? If your customer wasn't happy in 2005, what happened?
I don't know. I'll just go and get another client and...
He would call your boss would call you into the office, and he'd say, Sahir, why are you doing that? And you'd say, I'll never do it again. And then you went off and did the same thing, right? What happens in 2020 if you don't have a happy customer?
This is a disaster for an organization. It affects their branding. It's on social media. It's everywhere. It can actually bankrupt an organization.
No question. Because about 70% of people are going to go on social media. My wife does it all the time. She's like, we're not staying there. I'm like, why? It's 5-star reviews. They're not really. You just read the reviews. When we're traveling or something like that, before I buy a CPA or anything, I want somebody like me, right, to tell me this is good. In the old days, we used references at the end. You already made your decision. By the way, before 2007, no one ever gave you a bad reference. They were somebody's cousin or brother or something like that. Today, I'm like, so here, you're interested in HubSpot? Let me give you a couple of people who are Canadian agencies that have just been through this. You talk to them, right? And they have more credibility than I would, right? And they're going to tell you, no, Tyre's a little loud, but he knows what he's talking about, right? He's going to ask you some really good questions, right? He knows all the questions to ask. And if you're in this category, you should definitely go with him. If you're not in this category, here are your other considerations. And that's the right thing to do, because if you're not a good fit for my business,
you're right.
I don't want to sell you software. I want you to go to one of our competitors. Go to Salesforce, go to Mark. If that's a better fit, my job is to say, you know what, you're better served going to Salesforce, right? And if you're a good fit, we're going to love you at HubSpot. You're going to love us. It's going to be a long, good 10-year relationship. But I'm not doing my job. We have a chapter on that. Professor Winehouse, David Winehouse, is a good colleague of mine. He's been at HubSpot for 10 years. A partner, called him and said, we're ready to sign up for HubSpot. He goes, okay, before you sign up, I want to make sure if it's a good fit. And he got all through it. He goes, you're not really a good fit. And they're like, no, we got our credit card here. And he's like, I know, but I'm not going to sign you up. And they're like, excuse me? They're like, you're not going to it's not going to be a good relationship. You're not ready for HubSpot. We don't want you to buy from us. And they're like, screw you. They went to a competitor. It was a horrible experience. They came back. They did all the stuff David told them, and then they signed on 2 years ago. And then they were at a partner event. They tracked David down. They go, do you know who we are? And David's like, no, who are you? They're like, you told us 2 years ago that we weren't going to be a good partner. And David says, okay. And then they go, and you were right. And it takes a lot for a salesperson to refuse an order, right? When somebody got their credit card on. But we spent a whole chapter because that's important. And that's the way you build credibility in the entire ecosystem. And you're only as good as your reputation. And if you help a lot of people, right, then you're Sahir, the guy in Canada who works with industrial, and you'll get all the business. right? All of the industrial manufacturing companies, well, they won't go anyplace else. They'll go to Sahir. That's like 90% of his business. He understands, he can help you. He'll dig into the integrations and to the APIs. He'll help you with systems integrations, the consolidation of your tech stack. He'll teach your salespeople, teach your marketing folks. It'll be amazing. And because that's who you work with, you'll do a good job.
Dan, you're an amazing person, and thank you for all the kind words. And I'm learning from you each day. So I'm learning from the master all the time.
Number one, you've been a part of our ecosystem for how long?
6+ years.
Yeah, I know. So we've built a multi-billion-dollar company on people like you. Number two, you have the nicest heart as I am, right? I asked you for a favor earlier this year, and you're like, yeah, whatever. And I'm like, it's like 50 hours worth of work. You're like, okay. Other than making me move it to a Thursday, which I told you I was going to bring that up on the podcast, which we did, right? You're always so willing to help, right? And that big heart, that goes a long way. So anything I could do to help you,
thank you, Dan.
To connect, right? We're thrilled at your success. The reason why you've grown 30% a year is because you're damn good. You provide amazing value, right? And you can deliver the goods, right? All I got to do is sell it. You can sell it. You can deliver it. You sweat the details for your clients. I'm a huge fan. And podcast listeners out there, if you're looking to grow your business, okay, you don't have to listen to Dan Tyre anymore. Just find Sahil at Flawless, fill out his form. He'll have somebody call you and see if it's a good fit.
Thank you, Dan. I just want to say one thing. The reason why I think we're doing okay is I have an amazing mentor like yourself that influenced me in my personal life and in Flawless Unbound. I want to thank you for amazing advice that you gave today. It was a pleasure just kind of listening to you, and you have been leading the whole interview. That was the easiest interview and the most fun interview I've ever done in my life, by the way.
Wait a second.
You raised the bar here.
I know. I do a few podcasts. I didn't get enough jokes in. I should have asked your listeners if they wanted more jokes. All right, here's my quarantine joke. What kind of footwear does a frog wear? Open-toed. Boom! I'm here till Tuesday. Dip your way. I know. I got that from a 9-year-old on Tumblr. I know. It's a dad joke.
Wow.
You can use. I know. Okay. Now I feel complete. Now we have the comedic section of the podcast done.
So Dan, final question. What's the one advice you can give to leaders right now?
Yeah.
Have big teams. They're spread thin, and they want to stay honest to their clients. To the growth trajectory. What is this one advice that you can leave the audience with? Okay,
3 things. Number one, have a plan. If you don't have a written plan, right, you can't run from the seat of the pants anymore, right? You also have to have a contingency plan, right? For me, the riches are in the niches, right? Overseas, they don't say niches, they say niches. So if you want to go to the beaches, you've got to focus on the niches, right? Somebody from Norway told me that yesterday. I'm using that. We'll see if that works, right? And if you're industrial and manufacturing, not all your business has to come from it, but you got to get very, very specific. Because if you're a manufacturing company in Canada and you say, no, we work with companies in Ottawa, right, that are at least $3 million in revenue and trying to get to 10 million over the next 2 years. Does that sound like you? If they're in that category, they're going to say, yes, it does. Tell me more, right? So it seems a little counterintuitive, but in the old days, like 2018, you could be a generalist. Today, right, the riches are in the niches. And the third advice I give to people is always be branded, right? People wouldn't recognize me if I wasn't in my HubSpot t-shirt, right? And it costs $10 to get a black t-shirt, the name of your company, right? Hustle is a competitive advantage in 2020, right? You've seen the statistics. When somebody drops content on your website, you got 5 minutes to respond, right? 5 minutes. It used to be, I called you back on Thursday if you dropped it on Monday, and people were like, oh, thanks for calling me back. Now, last year in July, I was in Africa. I was in Tanzania. Right? And I got somebody dropped their contact information on dantyre.com. I called him from Tanzania. He's like, Dan, that was 3 hours ago. I'm like, okay, I'm in Africa. He's like, come on, 3 hours ago. And there's just higher expectations in 2020. I know, amazing. Anyway, if you want more information, www.dantyre.com is my personal website. If you want more information on the book, www.inboundorganization.com. right? Todd and I work there all the time. There's lots of podcasts and updated information. And if there's anything I can do to help your podcast listeners, I'm all in, right? I mean that from the bottom of my heart. The reason I'm the luckiest guy in the world, I help lots of people, right? And as long as you make it easy for me, right? Just like you did, you sent me the questions in advance, you booked the time, all that kind of stuff. I'm happy to help because it's a rush, right? Americans love Canadians, right? I don't care what you hear. We love them. We'd love to embrace you, but it's $500,000 if we cross the border. So we got to do it remotely, right? But we work together all the time. We're one part of the North American family, right? We love our Canadian partners. HubSpot is a big thing in Canada, and anything I can do personally or professionally to help you or your customers or prospects, I'm all in.
Dan, you are an amazing human being and a great leader, and very honored personally that you are spending the time here with us. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate it.
Very good to hear. Thank you so much for being a guest. Happy to be a return guest, and let me know what I can do to help.
Love it. Thank you, Dan. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much.
So for the audience today, I hope you guys got a lot of notes because I got a lot of notes as well. That was an amazing learning experience, I think. And Dan, that was beautiful. Have a great day, everyone. I'll see you later. Bye for now.